life may come from space, this may affect evolution, and that's what I want to talk about. How would panspermia affect evolution? The standard theory of evolution is that evolution advances when random mutations affect the genome and the next generation is improved somehow. But in fact, random mutations are usually harmful, and the mutations that improve the next generation are not random. The first example would be when bacteria are under stress, the rate of mutation increases. And that is called adaptive mutation. They're trying to adapt. But more recently, we've learned that not only does the rate of mutation increase under stress, but it increases only in certain places within the genome. They used to call that directed mutation, but that's very far from random. Now, even more recently, we've learned that there's something called diversity-generating retroelements that affect bacteria and archaea. They call them by their initials DGRs, diversity-generating retroelements. These are introduced by viruses. They attach to certain parts of the genome. They affect only the A base, and they create lots of varieties of whatever the protein was. So that's far from random. But now everything we've talked about so far is in the category that I would call microevolution. Microevolution is the improvement of the programs that are already there. It is optimization, is another way to put it. But there's another bigger step in evolution, and it's called macroevolution. Now, I know among Darwinists, microevolution and macroevolution are fighting words sometimes. They think it's the same thing, but it's not. When a bacterium, for example, cannot digest lactose or milk, or needs to digest some new nutrient, they need a whole new program. It's not just a point mutation here and there. And they acquire those by horizontal gene transfer, sometimes just called by its initials, HTT. And in fact, today we know that that is the way bacteria evolve. In the year 2000, I met with Ernst Mayr. He was one of the architects of the modern synthesis of evolution. He lived to be 100 years old, and he said to me that among bacteria, horizontal gene transfer is all there is. How do bacteria initiate horizontal gene transfer? One way is by conjugation. That is, the two bacteria come together, they connect. It's like bacterial sex, and they swap genes one way or the other. We've learned now that certain E. coli, when they sense a need, actually initiate the conjugation. So that's not random at all. They decide, I need something, and they go get it. There's even a bacterium, Vibrio coli. When they need something, they actually kill the donor. And he breaks open, this other cell breaks open, and they acquire their genes that way. So bacteria and archaea evolve take the big steps entirely by horizontal gene transfer. Now, what about eukaryotes, plants and animals? Well, believe it or not, same thing. This let's call it paradigm shift, has not happened yet. Among bacteria, it's already happened. It's not getting noticed because it's very important. It should be noticed. But among eukaryotes, it's in dispute. The Darwinists will pretend to you that horizontal gene transfer is somewhat rare, but it's not. For example, we all agree now that the way eukaryotic cells evolved in the first place was by symbiosis. That is to say, the mitochondria and the chloroplasts that eukaryotic cells contain were originally free-living bacteria that were swallowed by the recipient cell, and that's where eukaryotes come from. So that would be horizontal gene transfer on a very wholesale level. But that's not all of it. Many genes are acquired by eukaryotes from viruses. Viruses are the transfer agent. Let me ask how many people know that already, that viruses transfer genes. Okay, good. Good, some of us do. Well, they can be very important genes. For example, in January of this year, a team from Lund University was able to observe that viruses that have been in the human genome for millions of years are important in the development of the human brain. Those are viruses. In March of 2015, where's my March of 2015, Eugene Kunin and Mark Kuprovnik wrote, and Kunin is at the National Institutes of Health, and he also edits a magazine about evolution. But they wrote this: all cellular organisms persist and evolve under a perennial onslaught of mobile genetic elements, which they call MGEs, such as transposons, viral sequences, and plasmids. Many, if not most, of these, quote, selfish elements insert into the chromosomes of the cellular host either as an obligate part of their life cycles, or at least sporadically. In multicellular eukaryotes, mobile genetic elements constitute a substantial portion of the host genome. For example, greater than 50% of the genome in mammals. Now, the genome in humans is only 1.5% protein coding genes. So this is far greater than that we acquired from some kind of mobile genetic elements. And by the way, a lot of these things that we may have acquired that way would be no longer recognizable. They've been so fully integrated. And so it could be more than 50%. And among plants, it can be greater than 70%. So this is quite striking and not yet digested by standard Darwinism at all. Sometimes the genes are donated from a species that seems not to need them. For example, there was a team in Japan, Sakura-san, who went in deep into mud under the Pacific Ocean and found species of archaea, one of which had 175 genes that were, until that moment, considered to be specific to eukaryotes. And there they are in these archaea, who, as far as we know, don't have any use for them, but they're just there. Well, isn't this interesting, and why are they there? Well, if horizontal gene transfer is the way evolution works, they got to be somewhere. So you could ask the same question about why are there genes for photosynthesis in viruses, which there are. Why are they there? Well, they got to be somewhere. This would be, if they weren't there, then I'd have to go back and rethink. Well, what does it mean? If life comes from space, and if it really all comes from space, this is how it would work. And this would change the way we feel about our whole existence. We're not a random place where life suddenly sprang up and it just happens to be this way. We're connected. We're connected to life out beyond, and maybe it's a lot like we are. The one thing that we have trouble with, because we have an extreme theory, according to some, is that, boy, we really have to prove it. We say we saw fossils in a meteorite or something that points to life from space. The rest of the world says, you need an airtight case or we're not going to believe it. But I think we should apply the same standard to the theory of evolution. When they say to us, we know how life evolves with random mutation and that's how things get better. We should apply that standard to them. You need to prove it. The way they would prove it would be, for example, with a closed experiment. If they had some bacteria in a closed environment where no more genes can enter, what's the potential, the evolutionary potential? Well, those experiments are being done And right now, after more than 50,000 generations, the best known one is getting nowhere. Nothing's happened. Well, what about, could we make a computer model and maybe demonstrate the Darwinian method of evolution in a computer model? Because maybe it's too slow waiting for biology. Well, this is being tried as well with no result. Thirdly, and this is clearly third best, maybe we can reconstruct the history of life by studying the genomes that are now available to see, such as these archaea and things that I've been talking about. Well, we're doing that. And what we're learning is it's horizontal gene transfer. So we think that's how life evolves. And I would like to ask for my website to be pulled up. All of these things I've said are referenced on my website. I have the website at panspermia.org. I titled it Cosmic Ancestry. I welcome you to look there and get references on everything I've just said, plus much more.
Thank you, Professor Klyce. Do we have any comments, questions?
I just want to make a comment that Brig's website is amazing. I got my PhD this week, okay, so I encourage you to do the same.
Brig, I'm biased, but I think that's a fantastic presentation. And if anyone is not convinced by that, I think they need their heads looking into.
All right. Thank you, Professor Klyce. Moving on, our next speaker will be talking on the topic preliminary